My name is Colleen Smith. I am a graduate of IHN. I graduated in April 2013, and I am the head administrator and program advisor for our online live program and our self-paced program. And I also help Julia in our Con Ed department, taking and handling all the Con Ed registrations. So I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today. So Dr. David, he is a naturopath doctor, and he's going to be talking about one of our Con Ed courses, an excerpt from it, Understanding Lab Diagnostics in Clinical Practice. So today he'll be talking about making weight loss efficient, objective laboratory values to assess metabolism. And if you'd like to join our lab diagnostics course, we do have it coming up in early September. So today you'll learn on the webinar what influences metabolism, what conventional labs are best suited to identify the causes of a low metabolic rate, how to influence results using nutritional strategies, how to build a weight loss program that supports optimal metabolic rates, and then how to help clients maintain their successes through metabolic-focused nutrition. So Dr. David is a naturopath with a Bachelor of Science from the Royal Military College of Canada. He graduated from the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine in 2014. He currently serves as the chair of the Board of Governors at the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. He also has a private practice. He's co-owner of Noble Naturopathic in Vancouver, where he has a private practice focused on integrative chronic disease management, and he teaches our Understanding Lab Diagnostics in Clinical Practice at IHN. So let's welcome David, everybody.
Thanks for the nice intro. My goodness, Colleen. I appreciate that.
Anyways,
that was great.
Thank you. Enjoy the webinar, everybody.
Let's do it. Here's my slideshow. Okay, we're open. So let me organize my bar. Making weight loss efficient. Okay, so 2/3 of Canadians are either overweight or obese in those BMI categories. But why? Is it too many calories consumed, not enough expended, or is it some other reason? Could it be hormones? Could it be elevated insulin? What could be the cause of this significant issue for our health system and for the optimal wellness of Canadians? What is the cause? And so today I'm here to talk about how to assess for metabolic rate, because understanding the calories in, calories out model is essential to support people. Not to say that it's the model that we have to talk about or be excited about or program for exclusively, but to know that the things that impact calorie burn, the things that impact metabolism, those are the things people are wondering about. And in order to actually support people, we have to know how factors that influence our health actually influence our metabolism so that we can program efficiently for them. So the best example of this is people eat less, move more, and they don't lose weight. And they say, well, the calories in, calories out model doesn't work for them. And I would say that's absolutely true, but the model is still the model, but the changes they made actually influence the calorie burn. And our job is to help them keep the highest possible calorie burn so that the model can work for them. Not to be dogmatic about calories all the time, but to help them optimize for metabolic rate. A metabolic approach to weight loss is my obsession clinically. And so today we'll talk about how to help people optimize for an elevated level of metabolic rate. So like Colleen said, I teach lab diagnostics, the CE course. It's the coolest course. We have a great time. It's very much informal in the sense that I'm an expert on many things and have a broad range of expertise, but I'm not an expert on all things. So we explore all the conventional diagnostics, all the functional diagnostics that have been available the last 10 years. And then anything that's come up in the last year, we try to touch on. So it's a really cool course for those who are looking to supplement their career in a way that helps them be a really, really, really good team member, being able to communicate with other health professionals about lab diagnostics, about lab tests and how to interpret them, and how to approach objective data in healthcare, both for longevity, chronic disease prevention, and also for management. And so it's really, really fun. We meet eight nights and review all the possible labs. Basically, any lab that you could see in clinical practice, we go over. So you've got experience, you've got a touch point. It's not new to you, and you have to have a conversation about it in clinical practice. And our clients are smarter than ever and well researched. And it's helpful to have some exposure to all the things that they're going to be chatting about when they come talk to you. This course tries to cover all the objective measurements that they could be exposed to before they come chat with you. So you can have some expertise while you're chatting. And it's the coolest thing. We have a lot of fun. And I encourage you to join us if you're not already signed up. So we already had a good review of me. But the thing that I'm most proud of right now, other than my kids, is the fact that I've done 1,000 metabolism tests. People come to me because they think their metabolism is low and cutting calories doesn't work for them. And then we measure metabolism and it actually is low. They're right. And then we sort out why the heck it's low. And then what happens is the meal plan they were doing before actually starts to work for them once we've improved their metabolic rate. That's it. Very simple. 1,000 resting tests and exercise tests, measuring calorie burn. If it's low, boosting it naturally, and then creating a deficit for them so we can get predictable weight loss. We already went over the learning objectives, so I won't go through that again. We want to create good weight loss plans for good burners and weight loss plans for bad burners. In order to do that, we need to know who's a good burner and who's a bad burner. Even if you're not doing metabolism tests in office, you can still use the principles. So I'm going to go over a bunch of principles today that could be applicable. Sometimes people don't test with me, and we apply the principles anyways because they're safe and effective for maintaining metabolic rate. Here's the only case. Nothing works. I've been eating less and moving more like my doctor told me to. Why am I not losing? Why am I not achieving what we would consider to be a healthy body composition? Which really, it doesn't matter about weight. What matters is that visceral fat, visceral adiposity, that there's not a ton of adiposity surrounding the organ tissues, because that's really what hurts people. And so we track that in the office here, of course, and many of you have probably seen an in-body machine or body composition machine before that can track visceral fat. That's what's important. So helping people achieve a very low visceral fat level is the goal. And today I'm going to review what my approach is. So pretend you're not actually measuring metabolic rate. What might you do? You might find a basal metabolic rate, which is really a predicted resting rate to figure out how much calorie a person would need in order to keep their organs healthy. So you'd go through the Harris-Benedict calculator. This is available online if you Google Harris-Benedict calculator. And right in the middle of the page there, you'll see BMR. That stands for basal metabolic rate. You've probably learned this before. Get a sense of the basal rate, add on daily activities, add on exercise activities to get a total daily energy expenditure, and then subtract to find out how many calories should be in your meal plan. Now, so if you found out total daily energy expenditure and you subtract 750 calories, then the person should lose 6 pounds a month. If you subtract 1,000 calories, they should lose 8 pounds a month. But the question was the calculator right for them? Or was their metabolism actually lower than predicted? So that's obviously my favorite thing to do. We measure resting rate in the office and get that exact number so that we know we're actually creating a deficit for them. If you're not measuring resting rate, which many of you will not be because it's not popular across Canada just yet, you have to make estimates. This calculator allows you to estimate. And then our job, really, when we make an estimation, is to do everything possible to keep metabolism elevated. You've probably heard these before. Sleep through the night, keep stress low, have a normal level of estrogen and testosterone, make sure thyroid is optimized, eat protein within 30 minutes of waking. All the good things that can help keep metabolism normal, we double down. Today, we'll go through all of them. So just a quick study here just to get us, get us going, get us shaking. This is a recent one from obesity, called Obesity in the Aging Man. I thought this was interesting. So we think about resting metabolic rate being low for those who have difficulty losing weight. It decreases about 2 to 3% per decade after the age of 20. And so that doesn't seem like a lot. But then when a person becomes 60 and 70, it really does add up. Hey, doc, I'm eating the same I've always eaten and I'm gaining weight. What is happening? Metabolism has declined. Postprandial thermogenesis, a very important component of metabolism, basically the thermic effect of food, it reduces as we age. I'm eating the same I always ate, but it's not as effective. I met someone today who's in their 40s, who has the same old strategies they used in their 20s and 30s for maintaining a healthy weight don't work anymore. Something has changed. It could be the effects of aging, both on just general metabolism decline, but also as we age, we typically move less. We typically train less. We lose muscle mass, and muscle drives metabolism more than anything. But also the thermic effect of food becomes less as we age. And so I thought this was interesting just to give you a starting point where I'm coming from. But what really drives metabolism? This is my favorite slide. Like if we needed to have, a high level overview for an integrative person who's trying to practice a holistic approach, this is the slide. This is what we can influence clinically in practice. And this is how I approach my visits when a person has a low metabolic rate. And when you're not measuring metabolic rate, you can still take these very seriously. Don't have nutrient deficiencies. Iron is a big one. What happens with iron? Someone gets deficient in iron, which is incredibly common, by the way. It's not like their metabolism declines because of the iron deficiency. What happens is they burn fat less efficiently because of the iron deficiency. And that causes them to experience more fatigue. And then they move less. And because they move less, they have less metabolic rate. It's lower. When we move, we have to expend energy, which is what happens, which is what metabolism is. And so iron deficiency, this is the kind of principle, right? Like, is B vitamin deficiency causing low metabolic rate? Not necessarily, but it might change the way a person lives. They might not get their 10,000 steps when they're deficient in B vitamins. They may not recover from exercise and be able to train as much as they'd like to if they're deficient in antioxidants and amino acids. And so now they're training less, which will drive down their metabolism. So if they did have a metabolism test, it might not be lower than predicted, but it might be less than they're used to. Someone comes to you and says, well, I'm eating the same amount, but I'm gaining weight. I'm not sure if my metabolism's low. If you measured metabolism and was normal, it may be that it's just less than it was prior, which is really, really helpful to think about and to know, like, metabolism can change. And so I think that's really relevant. Some clues might be poor healing, sleeping worse than before, more stress than before. These are some clues that might tell us that, okay, things are a little different now. They're not recovering from exercise as fast as they may have. Magnesium and selenium are incredibly important. A significant portion of our population is deficient in magnesium, vitamin D. These two are very, very important for metabolic rate. And so we can think about basically any nutrient deficiency and metabolism. I suggest not having any deficiencies. Selenium is, of course, important for the thyroid. Selenium, iodine, these deficiencies will cause metabolism to go down. And that brings us over to the hormonal conversation. When you're working with someone who's trying to lose weight, very often they're a female who's just entered menopause and has gained weight without changing anything. 10 to 15 pounds in menopause is completely common. So what is it? It's related to hormones. It could be thyroid, estrogen, or testosterone. Something is happening that is impacting their ability to maintain their weight or lose weight if they're on a journey. Those changes, they actually lower metabolic rate. So it is calories in, calories out. But if you didn't have a measurement of the calories, you'd think it was not related to calories. Hormones cause changes in calorie burn. And so thinking about hormones all the time when doing holistic weight loss is really, really helpful. This is my short list. Thyroid. This is the main driver of energy production, or should I say calorie burn. Usually we do TSH, T3, and T4. In the course, we cover them in detail, how to think about them, what's useful, what's not useful. When we think about testosterone and estrogen, they drive metabolism so much. When people are low in these two hormones, they have difficulty maintaining a healthy body weight. Part of it is through the difficulty in maintaining muscle mass, and part of it is that these hormones actually have an influence on energy production. Cortisol is a big one. When people have a short bout of anxiety, they actually burn more calorie. When people take a stimulant and their cortisol goes up, they burn more calorie. Metabolism is higher for a couple of days. And then with chronic stress, chronic use of stimulants, metabolism declines as cortisol declines because of burnout. DHEA influences testosterone and has an impact on testosterone, has an impact on metabolism on its own as well. And then finally, insulin. We need to have an adequate level of insulin in order to train hard and keep our muscle. So eating some carbs actually is very, very important for maintaining muscle mass and for training hard and actually building muscle. But insulin is a tricky one, right? Too high of a levels can drive a cascade that might not be so favorable because it can alter, again, just like iron deficiency, that use of fat versus carb for fuel, which could change how a person acts during the day, how much movement they have. So it's a nice slide just as a quick reference guide that you can use in your clinical practice tomorrow when someone says they're eating the same but actually gaining weight or doing their old stuff for weight loss and not having success. Here's a quick look at a systematic review of estrogen use in metabolism. Basically, in this one, I just put these in here just to show you that, hey, this is being studied like right now. This is August 6th of 2023, this time last year. And so we look at menopausal weight gain, and this group of researchers does a systematic review on 10 studies. And the results demonstrated that estrogen administration in menopause increases energy expenditure 200 calories per day. In the context of contraception, and by 222 calories per day in the context of menopausal hormone therapy. So in bioidentical hormone therapy in menopause increases calorie burn, period. So I thought that was helpful just to see what it's like when you look at 10 studies at once, the use of estrogen, significant impact on calorie burn. But the list continues. Let's get more into lifestyle. So we talked about nutrients and hormones. Those are more about objective assessments. But now everyone's wearing a smartwatch. We can look at REM versus deep. That's going to impact a person's ability to do the things they want to do, which is what drives metabolism, the maintenance of muscle, for example. Quantity and timing of sleep are incredibly important. And when people don't sleep well, all the stuff on the previous page, absorption of nutrients and the production and use of hormones becomes diminished. And so poor sleep can influence metabolism incredibly negatively. Then we have the actual main driver of metabolism, and that is about the volume of skeletal muscle mass. How much muscle a person has is what drives metabolism more than anything. Let's get a little more nuanced than this. If we get a little more nuanced, we might think about that person who has an elevated BMI because of muscle mass. So someone is in the overweight or obese category, but is not so concerned about BMI because they have so much muscle. Totally fair. When that happens, we turn to body fat percentage. For females, we try to keep the body fat percentage below 28. And for males, we try to keep it below 20 when the person's BMI is elevated. And we need to think about body fat percentage. And then if you don't have a scale, I actually have some numbers to share with you that could be useful for monitoring using waist to hip measurements. So for men, a waist to hip ratio ideal will be below decimal 9.0. And for females, ideal is below decimal 80. For waist to hip ratio, you measure the waist and hip as centimeters or inches and have a look at the ratio between those two numbers. Normal will be below decimal 9.5 for men, and optimal will be below decimal 9.0. And for women, below decimal 8.5 is normal, and below decimal 8.0 is optimal. And that's so helpful if you don't have a body composition scale. If you want to get really, really into calculations and helping people do objective tracking for body composition, you can use something called relative fat mass, RFM. And there's calculators available online that you can use to help people determine their relative fat mass. The goal for men would be 20, and the goal for women would be 30. The point of saying all this is that having a high level of muscle is very helpful for driving a very high metabolic rate. But when a person is in the overweight or obese BMI categories, what happens is that relative to their total weight, their metabolism is not higher than a leaner muscular person. Because they have more muscle, their metabolism is higher quantitatively. The total volume of calories burned is higher, but calories burned per kg of body weight is not higher. So when you read the studies, you see that people who are overweight have lower metabolic rates. And it's relative. It's lower metabolic rate per kg of body weight, which is very important to note. So, but for our purposes, we're trying to program nutrition. We're trying to write nutrition plans. So thinking about total calorie expenditure and the things that influence it is most important. And muscle influences it more than anything. That's why people lift weights when they're trying to lose weight, to maintain a high level of muscle mass while they eat in a calorie deficit. There's two other things that impact calorie burn: muscle repair, actually healing from lifting weights, and aerobic and anaerobic activity. Doing cardio influences calorie burn. When we do our resting tests, we have to take 24 hours off of exercise because exercise has such a significant impact on resting energy expenditure. If someone walks up the 2 blocks to my office and then tries to do a resting test right away, their metabolism is higher than if we lay down and relax on the table for 10 minutes. And so we try to do the test as rested as possible. What does this mean clinically? Clinically, this means that if we train every second day, our metabolism is going to be as high as it possibly could from exercise. If we lift weights, every time we're recovered and go through that recovery process again, our metabolism is going to be as high as it possibly could be. So what does that mean for us? It means exercising every second day. The Health Canada recommendation of 150 minutes of exercise is really helpful because you could split it up into 4 days, right? 45 minutes every second day forever will maximize your calorie burn. I love that recommendation. Another quick study to review, this is looking at cortisol, for example, in calorie burn. Cortisol on carbohydrate, fat, and protein metabolism, the studies of acute cortisol withdrawal and adrenal cortical failure. I put this one in here to give a sense of what happens when someone is really stressed for a really long period of time. This is looking at it a different way. They're looking at people who have Addison's disease, which is where cortisol is incredibly low. When people have chronic stress and burnout and experience very low cortisol from that burnout, it's very similar to this, but not as extreme. The reason I put it in here is because energy expenditure in Addison's disease is lower. So when cortisol is incredibly low, energy expenditure is lower. So our job is to really help to maintain a healthy adrenal function so that people can have maximized metabolism at rest thanks to their cortisol levels. I had a case, my best case ever is the person who'd recently lost 100 pounds with our clinic. And they struggled for their entire life. They came in at 60, 100 pounds with 100 pounds of weight to lose. We did a cortisol test and found out that their cortisol was very low. All we did was measure metabolism, create a deficit meal plan and exercise plan, and give them adrenal support. And they lost 100 pounds in 15 months and had no cravings or elevations in appetite and no reductions in energy, which was, they found it easy. And that's the best part about creating a plan like this. The person should find it easy. So I feel like we did a great job on that case. Finally, the thermic effect of food. People talk about the thermic effect of food being like, 8 to 10% of your consumption, 8 to 10% of your calorie burn is going to be just like digestion. But it's helpful to know that there's a difference between each macronutrient. The thermic effect of protein is actually 20%, maybe even a little higher. The thermic effect of carbs is 10%, and the thermic effect of fat is 2 to 3%. And this is of the calories within those foods. Now, I recently learned from a sports scientist that that's actually incorporated into the calories that are listed on the packaging. And so if you see some protein and it says that it's 100 calories, it's actually 20% higher than that. The thermic effect of the protein has actually been accounted for on the packaging. So that's my new understanding of this. But that doesn't mean that not having a protein-focused nutrition plan while practicing holistic weight loss isn't appropriate still. It still is. Having appropriate levels of protein allows a person to maintain their muscle while they eat in a deficit. The worst thing that can happen, and we see that sometimes, of course, so people are taking semaglutide and other molecules that cause low appetite, medications that cause low appetite. Very often they don't consider the volume of protein needed to maintain muscle while they're eating less because of the medication they're on, and they lose muscle. And then when they stop the medication, they gain it back. So you'll see people who are doing this, and it's detrimental long term. It makes it such that a person has to be medicated forever. When you're making a plan for a person and trying to support their metabolism, maintaining the muscle is primary goal. The primary goal. It's number one, and protein helps that, of course. My strategy is, for vegetarians, usually I'm shooting for decimal 5 grams per pound of body weight at the low end. And for people who are not vegetarian or vegan, I'm going for decimal 7.5 grams per pound of body weight. If they're trying to gain some muscle, being between decimal 7.5 to 1 gram per pound of body weight is very helpful. I am not the protein guy. This is not a forever thing. I'm a blue zone guy. In order to participate in a longevity plan, we have to achieve an optimal body composition first, and that requires a protein-focused diet. So it's not forever. It's just until they reach their lowest visceral fat level. The medications, stimulant medications, ADHD medications, they raise metabolism. They really do. If they take them before my test, the metabolism looks sky high. Thyroid hormone, the purpose of thyroid hormone is to keep metabolism normal. So we measure people who have taken their thyroid hormone all the time to help them achieve the appropriate dose. And I love that strategy. But if someone doesn't have an optimal thyroid function, we cover this in the course. If their thyroid function is not optimal, it's going to be really difficult for them to lose weight. And so supporting them any way you can is going to be very helpful. Here's a quick one just for fun to cap off the nutrient side of things. Vitamin D supplementation does not impact resting metabolic rate, body composition, and strength in vitamin D sufficient physically active adults. But guess what? If you look a little deeper, in vitamin D insufficient physically active adults, vitamin D supplementation makes a big difference for resting energy expenditure. Most Canadians are deficient in vitamin D. That's why it's the only thing our government recommends we all take. It's a very good recommendation. It makes a difference for immune function, but it also makes a difference for energy expenditure, for metabolism. So people say it's not the calories in, calories out model. It's something else. That's right, but that something else impacts calorie burn. Vitamin D deficiency impacts calorie burn. And there's lots of studies that show that. So how do we get there? How do we get to a spot where people have hormones that are imbalanced, deficiencies in nutrients, loss of muscle mass? What is actually happening and how can we help them? Well, malabsorption can cause these problems, right? Malabsorption of nutrients is a big thing, whether it be not getting enough sun because of the geographical region you live in, or having a digestive condition that impacts absorption of nutrients, or as a tertiary item, our food being deficient. Our food being deficient is a big problem. So in the course, we talk about nutrient testing. We talk about conventional nutrient assessments like vitamin D and zinc and iron and B12 and how valuable they can be. And we also talk about functional nutrient assessments, complex nutrient assessments. Gosh, we want to go for optimal. Let's test everything. Let's go all in, because a deficient in any one thing could impact the way a person is in the world, and their action in their world will impact their metabolism. If they can't train, if they can't sleep, if they're too stressed, if they're feeling tight, if their hormones are off because of a nutrient deficiency, that's going to impact metabolism. Aging obviously impacts hormones, but it impacts muscle mass, not only because of hormone lowering, but because of inactivity. And this muscle loss is my favorite thing to talk about with people. And it's something we can all be supporting people in, making sure they achieve the right amount of protein and they're training appropriately to benefit their anabolic response, actually getting the right signal to the right tissue to maintain that muscle if maintenance is the goal, and to build if building is the goal. And then lifestyle, injury, and illness. Not being able to exercise for 2 weeks because of a cold causes some muscle loss. Not being able to sleep because you're in school and it's really super stressful for a while causes metabolism to go down. These are the things that we can support people in when we're building a holistic approach to metabolism optimization. People come in already fasting, right? They've been fasting for a long time. They had success at first, but then it plateaued. And people say, well, there's no such thing as a plateau. Not if you're measuring metabolism and continuing to reduce calories, but that causes worse problems. We want to be in a subtle deficit all the time when we're working in weight loss. And the only way to do that is to optimize for metabolic rate. And in order to optimize for metabolic rate, we can't be in too deep of a deficit. So chronic calorie restriction causes problems. You see these people who do too much fasting. One single macronutrient restriction can cause problems. Don't get me wrong. There are people out there who can be making ketones. So eating enough protein, but still making ketones. I think of Dom D'Agostino as an example. That guy lifts weights every day and eats a lot of protein, but still has high levels of ketone in his blood. Not everyone who goes keto has enough protein with ketones still in their blood. So it is possible, but it's very rare to see someone restrict a macronutrient like carbohydrate and maintain a normal metabolic rate. It is possible, but it's very difficult. Disease causing hormone imbalance, like that Addison's disease I just mentioned, chronically low cortisol. How about testosterone deficiency because of a condition? These things can cause impacts of metabolism. Beta blockers, corticosteroids, certain antidepressants, especially the TCAs and antipsychotics, can cause low metabolic rate. And anti-seizure medications slow everything down, just like beta blockers, and decrease metabolism. So how do we approach this? In the course, we go over this in super good detail because we do the whole conventional approach as well. But what do we do if we suspect the metabolism is low, aside from optimize for the best metabolism a person could ever have? Well, we can look at some lab tests. In the CBC and iron test, we can look at anemia. Does a person have iron deficiency anemia, B12 deficiency anemia, or folate deficiency anemia, or anemia of chronic disease for that matter, a different type of anemia? All of these can lower energy, which lowers output, which lowers metabolism. The thyroid panel, most important, top of the line test for metabolic rate, TSH, T4, and T3. It's a bit complicated, and you may have only ever seen a TSH test. And that's because T4 and T3 can vary so much. They can vary during the day, especially T3. And the support of them is not always conducive to, not always usable conventionally. So the main medication for hypothyroidism is Synthroid, synthetic T4, and a person doesn't need to know the T4 level in order to prescribe that properly. What if a person's not on Synthroid? Well, jeepers, it can be very helpful to know the T4 level. The T3 is debatable, up in the air, and we talk about that in the course. Total testosterone, I love this test. I love total T, I love bioavailable T, androsterone, 5-alpha DHT, ethylcolanolone, DHEA. This is the full testosterone panel, the full cascade. It's important to know that when supporting someone's metabolism. And then finally, insulin. To assess for insulin resistance and the ability to have appropriate fuel utilization at rest, knowing if someone is significantly insulin resistant can impact how a person is going to eat or should eat, and how we can approach their metabolism support. So in the course, we go over something called HOMA-IR. If you're interested in insulin, this is the test you want to know about. HOMA-IR. There's calculators online. It requires a fasting glucose and a fasting insulin. You can get a measurement for insulin resistance. Maybe the most important thing other than VO2 max to program for an all of integrative or holistic disease prevention. Then we have our functional lab assessments. This is my bread and butter. What do we do in metabolism? We already talked about a full nutrient panel. Gosh, that's awesome. Check that off the list. Know all the nutrients. What about the iodine panel? If we're not doing all the nutrients, we could take a peek at iodine, selenium, some toxic chemicals to the thyroid, given that thyroid is number one here, most important. We could look at cadmium. We could look at bromine. Hormone testing. In the course, we go over basic conventional hormone testing and detailed testing like the Dutch test or urinary assessments for hormones and hormone metabolites. That's done by many different companies. Stool analysis for malabsorption. We have a nutrient deficiency. How did we get here? We need to optimize for digestive function. Seems like the probiotics also play a role in metabolism. We know they play a role in appetite. Think about those GLP-1 medications. Our bacteria are really, really important when we're thinking about a holistic approach to appetite control. And then cortisol and melatonin assessments for sleep enhancement, for stress reduction, for optimizing metabolism through this holistic approach that covers all the hormones. Cortisol and melatonin are big ones to consider. In office, there are things we can do. We've talked about resting metabolism and muscle mass assessments because I'm obsessed. But what about insulin assessments or proxies for insulin, like CGMs? Putting a CGM on someone, watching their glucose over the course of the week, helping them manage what meals influence them the most can be really, really helpful. So elevated insulin causing an inability to use carbohydrate effectively as a fuel can influence metabolism significantly. Let's get into some strategies. What impact can we have? We can support a person's iron level and we can track how they're feeling. We can track their energy. Can you exercise every second day? Really, really important. We can help people with their thyroid. Sometimes it's a simple nutrient deficiency, not enough iodine and tyrosine, not enough ability to convert T4 into T3, selenium or zinc are things we cover in the course. DHEA and testosterone. We want to be in the top 1/3 of the age-dependent range for our hormones so that we can say that we're, encroaching on that decade younger hormonal place. Because remember, people who are a decade younger have a better metabolism. So we want to try to get there through healthy, non-medicated lifestyle actions. Think about the zinc support, amino acid support, healthy fats to make hormones. These are all strategies that we can use through nutrition. We can influence a person's activity. We want to actually help a person exercise. We want to make sure that they're fueled appropriately so they can train. If we create a deficit, but they get too tired because they're not eating enough, or they get a nutrient deficiency because of our deficit, that's going to cause a problem. So we want to create minor deficits. And the way to do that is to be specific with the calorie level and track them over time. How much weight are they losing per week? And then appetite and energy and cravings. Appetite, energy, cravings, and weight loss. Dial down, dial up, dial down, dial up until they find that sweet spot where they're in a deficit and losing, but feel okay. And then the thermic effect of food, optimizing for protein. Most good weight loss plans do this, and you probably know about this already. But what about exposures? If metabolism is low, 30 grams of protein first thing in the morning can make a difference. 3 hours later, let's do it again. 30 grams of protein. It's filling and it has a high thermic effect of food. So targeting that, say we're doing 150 grams of protein. Well, shoot, we could do 30 grams 5 times a day. Not that we have to cut it at 30 grams because we know now people can absorb 50 grams or maybe even a little more than that at one time. But gosh, if we're getting more exposures, pretend it's the year 2000 and you're recommending 6 meals a day again. Why did we do that back then? It's supportive of metabolic rate. So if someone suspects they have low metabolism and their appetite is not outrageous, if protein helps them with appetite, doing protein every few hours makes a difference. Building a weight loss program that supports a healthy metabolic rate. Don't do a deficit greater than 20%. These fasting protocols that we use, alternate day fasting, 5-2, 2 days a week, no food, 20 hours fasting, 4 hours eating. These can be really, really good if someone has a normal metabolism and a ton of muscle mass. But if you're not measuring both of those things, it's a bit risky, right? If they have a low muscle already and a low resting metabolism, that could make them worse. So if they're coming in thinking their metabolism is low already, I don't think fasting protocols are the way to go. I think metabolism support, eating every few hours, protein focused, training every second day, these are the things that would be helpful. Don't restrict one macronutrient unless a person has a clinical need to do so. And this doesn't mean that a person can't be low carb, can't be 130 grams of carb per day. Of course they can. But I'm talking zero. Anything less than 50 grams of carb is a problem. Same thing with anything less than 20 grams of fat. I think it's a problem because then we can't make hormones. So I think there's some caution to be had with macronutrient restriction. Making sure we support all the micronutrients and then keeping protein focused while saturated fat is low. I don't think we should be eating too much chicken skins and beef fat and pork fat while we're doing a protein focused diet. That's counterintuitive. And then accountability, personalized care. How often does the person need to check in? Following up with labs. Usually we like to do every 3 months for most labs. and tracking body composition to make sure we're getting meaningful change and muscle is not declining. It can take 4 to 6 weeks to see muscle go down. So I like that 6-week mark, 6 to 8 week, I think is kind of sweet spot for maintaining muscle while a person is in a deficit. That's my holistic approach. I know it's rapid fire. I'm making time for questions right now. I still have some time for questions, and I want to answer them all in detail, so I'll leave the time for that. Holistic approach to weight loss is the best approach. Like, it really is. It's the coolest. Thinking about metabolism while programming calorie deficits makes a big difference for people. And today we've gone through a strategy that considers thyroid management, hormone optimization, insulin management, cortisol maintenance. I didn't talk too much about inflammation reduction, but inflammation can impact the way our hormones work and can impact the way our cells experience or produce energy. So I think it's relevant. When we have chronic adiposity or we're in an obese state, we can have more inflammation. Fat cells are inflammatory in nature, and that can decrease metabolism. Sleep, ridiculously important. Our role is to program healthy nutrition plans. Metabolic rate is influenced by many, many things, including exercise and muscle mass and thyroid at the top of the list. And the others are absolutely relevant, and we should take them seriously. So if someone comes in and they say that they think their metabolism is low, I strongly believe that it's different than what they're used to. They're used to it being better. And something on this list is different than it was before. And that has dropped their metabolic rate, and we can help them. My course is coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to go through labs for digestion, labs for hormones, labs for nutrients, all the diagnostic labs that we use for chronic diseases, like the risk of heart attack and stroke, the risk, the labs used, for example, in diabetes, hypothyroidism, autoimmune diseases, as much as we possibly can cover. And then all the functional labs, toxicology labs, pathogens, infectious disease labs, some really, really, really cool ones. You're probably familiar with some of the names like Dutch test, GI map, heavy metal analysis, omega quant, lipid particles, anything you can think of. I've got experience. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've got almost 7,000 patient files. I have probably seen the test before. And so I'd be really excited to talk to you about it. Thanks for listening to my session today. I've got a podcast called Personalized. Check it out on YouTube, and you can listen to some of my really fun, cool interviews with some of the world's experts on this type of thing, people who are really, really smart in this realm. I like to ask them questions and learn as much as I can. So check out my podcast. Thanks for watching. All right, let's get into some questions.
Oh, thanks, David. That was very informative. Okay, so we'll go on. There was a few questions here. So Nicole had one question. Her question was,
hi to everyone I know, by the way. I know so many people who are here. It's nice to hear from you all. Nice to see your names again.
So is estrogen use safe for everyone? They say that overweight or obese can be estrogen dominant with high amounts of adipose tissue. Can this create an issue? What about estrogen dominant cancers? Can this be a trigger?
Yeah, we test. So great question. Person should never use estrogen in estrogen dominant cancers. Can estrogen be a trigger for those cancers? After 5 years of use between the ages of 50 and 60, the risk of estrogen sensitive cancers goes up a little, and the use of estrogens after the age of 60, 10 years away from menopause, can increase the risk of estrogen dependent cancers a little bit too. Are they safe for overweight and obese people to use? If they have estrogen dominance, then we wouldn't use estrogen. Of course, we only use estrogen if someone's deficient. And so that's why we test. Hope that helps.
Okay. Okay, let's see the next question. Okay, so Tamara says, if someone doesn't like to eat breakfast, the idea of eating in the morning makes them nauseous. Should we still force it?
Oh, we should inch it up. We should inch it up. Yeah, I strongly believe that we should inch it up. So I'm a chronic intermittent faster. I go through periods where I like to fast for very long periods of time. And when I get into a pattern of fasting, I notice nausea in the morning. Just the thought of food causes this aversion. I think that happens to a lot of people. If they haven't been eating in the morning since they were young, thinking about eating in the morning will make them feel nauseous. That's very common. If that's the cause, inching it closer to the morning, I think is a good strategy. If they're used to eating protein at 1 p.m., try noon for a couple of days, then try 11, then try 10, and inch it up. I think that helps. If the cause is something different, then that different thing should be treated. But generally, it's because they are not used to eating in the morning.
Okay. So Sebastian raised his hand. So I'm going to, where did Sebastian go? I was going to unmute him so he could ask his question. I got to find him in the list so we can, okay. Sebastian, you had a question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, I've been trying to lose weight my whole life, and I'm not sure why, I can't seem to get to the desired weight that I want to. I'm not sure if it's bad habits, lack of knowledge with the food and exercise, or what it is. So, would I be able to work with you on this somehow? Because I've worked with nutritionists, with dietitians, with weight trainers. It's crazy.
I have a clinical practice in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I measure metabolism and create deficit meal plans. If you want to test and be treated, of course, I'd be absolutely open to working with you. Do you mind me asking how tall you are and how much you weigh?
It's embarrassing. Okay,
you don't have to tell me that. You can also tell me how tall you are and how many calories you've eaten per day.
Okay, so around 5'8", 5'9", and around 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day.
2,000 to 2,500, and you didn't lose any weight at 2,000?
At 2,000, yeah, but I feel like I'm closer to 2,500.
Yeah, you're not in a deficit. I don't think you're in a deficit.
Yeah, I don't think I am.
Yeah, so you need to eat less. But I can't give you medical advice on the call. But I think you're eating too much.
But can I work with you on this, or?
Of course, yeah, you can consult with me, of course, anytime. It's at Noble Naturopathic.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Sebastian, if you email me afterwards, I can connect you with Dr. David.
Thanks, Colleen. I didn't know how to answer that one. Thanks, Sebastian. I don't know if I should be taking patients on the call. Yeah, anytime, Sebastian.
I'll email Colleen. Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, just let me. Okay, so then let's see the next. There's a couple in the Q&A.
I can see them if you want me to go through them. I don't mind.
Okay, so is there a particular adrenal formula that you recommend?
That's a great question. I'm not in webinars. Typically, I don't give brand names. So there are a series of amazing brands out there who make good adrenal formulas. If cortisol's low, we try to boost it, which was the example I gave earlier, where we use Siberian ginseng and rhodiola. And if cortisol is really high, we try to normalize it. And in that case, we use magnolia and ashwagandha and phosphatidylserine, which in both of those categories. Oh, and on the boosting side, we also use B5 and we use B5 and magnesium. And so there's lots of formulas out there that have exactly those ingredients in them. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so Natalie says, where do I request these labs from? An MD, or will you teach us how to read the test results in your course? And I am interested in GI mapping and Dutch hormone.
Excellent. So where do you request these labs from? I'll answer that one first. So it depends on what jurisdiction you're in. If you're in the United States, you can request them from the MD, but in Canada, they're from naturopaths. And we, in the course, give a list of labs that nutritionists can sign up for. So you could order them yourself, some of them. And the whole course is about reading the test results. So the answer to number 2 is yes. And you're interested in GI map and Dutch hormone. So am I. Favorite 2 tests.
Okay. Oh, and then Natalie said, and Sushi
Protocol, no. No,
Okay.
we don't do treatment. So I give some insight about how I approach things sometimes, but the course is not about treatment. The course is about familiarity with as many labs as possible in 8 weeks, which is a lot.
Okay. So tips for clients who has overweight, allergies of all fruits and vegetables, acute pancreatitis, and problems with gallbladder.
Thanks for the question, Ellen. That's a super complicated one. That's a toughie. Tips for a client who is overweight with allergies for all fruit and vegetables, who also has acute pancreatitis and problems with the gallbladder. So acute pancreatitis is incredibly dangerous and should be managed by the conventional team. And it's not something that any naturopaths usually work with. Usually, every 10 years, I've only seen it one time, and that's because I work from one block from the hospital. They ended up going to the hospital. Unfortunately, that is a little too specific for the type of session I have today. I wish I could give you a better answer, but I don't have one. Sorry.
Okay. And then ideal fasting time frame for menopausal women, 4 hours or more.
Yeah. So like I said in the session, if someone thinks that we personalize our care, so every menopausal woman is different. That's how I see it. So I would say that it would be different for everyone. Here are some examples. If someone has a very high level of muscle mass, like they're in the 120th percentile, they could get away with 16, 18 hours of fasting every day. And their metabolism would probably be very similar, after they reach their goal. If someone has a very low metabolic rate, then fasting would make them worse. I strongly believe that. I've seen it a couple of times in my practice. I worry about that. If someone has entered menopause and has incredibly low hormones, and we're worried about nutrient deficiencies, the main reason to do fasting is to pull the lever that is less calories through having a smaller eating window to benefit from low insulin for a long period of time, sure. But usually it's about that's a little more specific to diabetes and blood sugar control. Usually it's about eating less calories just because there's a shorter window. Sometimes that makes a person eat less healthy fats, and healthy fats are really important for hormone management. So I worry about fasting in that population, and that is not a population that I recommend fasting very often for. So I think that covers some good examples to help you answer your question.
Let's see if we have any other. Oh,
yeah, some are coming through in the chat.
Oh, okay. So, okay. Hi, as thyroid is super important, have you had any experience with someone who has had Graves' disease, then got radioactive iodine treatment, leaving them on Synthroid for life? Question mark. I'm curious if they would be supported like someone with general hyperthyroid issues.
Definitely. Yeah, great question. They're not supported on the iodine and tyrosine side of things because they're relying on Synthroid. So I have lots of experience with this realm. In fact, I have one person who has lost 50 pounds in the last year who, maybe no, 2 years ago, lost 50 pounds and hasn't had a usable or a thyroid that functions since they were young after treatment. And how do we support them? We maximize their metabolism. All the principles I talked about today, with the exception of helping the thyroid try to produce more T4. That would be the only one that's not relevant. Everything else is incredibly relevant. The difference in that population is about the lab tests not being helpful. So TSH often is below the range, even though they don't have hyperthyroid symptoms after they've been supported. So we leave that nuance up to the endocrinologist, given that it's incredibly complicated. But for weight loss, generally we try to find the sweet spot for metabolic rate through all the holistic things, and the safest, highest level of Synthroid that they can do, and then create a deficit.
Okay.
You're welcome.
that might be all the questions. I went through the chat.
There's a new one there. If we have one more minute that I could answer.
Oh,
Yeah. And she's asked two. Sleeping an issue, whether it's hormonal or stress related. What do you recommend or think about for sleep meds? And have tried other options, meditation, breathing techniques, etc. Okay, thank you for the question. So relevant to metabolism, like I said, sleep is ridiculously important for metabolic rate, but incredibly complicated again, and requires a very detailed, holistic approach. In insomnia, I like a few things. I like progesterone optimization, testing progesterone, making sure it's normal. And I like cortisol optimization. Should be low at night, but not zero, and normal in the morning, but not too high. And if those are out of range, then that's low hanging fruit. Then on the secondary approach, I would consider that first morning melatonin level to be normal, something we cover in the course. First morning melatonin should be normal. And magnesium should not be deficient. And Johns Hopkins has said that somewhere between 30 and 50% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a broad spectrum recommendation for magnesium support in the next couple of years here as well. So nutrients, cortisol, melatonin, progesterone. This is the type of holistic approach that makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference for people.
okay. Yeah, I think that's all the questions. So, so if anybody would like to join David's course, it is coming up starting on Tuesday, September the 10th from 6 p.m. till 9 p.m. Eastern, or 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. Pacific time. And it's from September the 10th till October the 29th. And it is 8 sessions every Tuesday evening. So I'm going to put my email in the chat, and then if anybody is interested, you guys can email me, and I'll give you more information on the course and how you can register. So if there's any final questions for David, just put them in the chat, and then we'll get them answered. And if there's no other questions, we'll wrap up our webinar.
Thanks, Colleen. Thanks everyone for listening.